like to introduce Rabbi Silber. So when we came to Baltimore, as you all know, we were sort of shell-shocked, and I didn't really understand exactly where I am and what are these surroundings. And Kadosh Baruch Hu still had Rachamim on me, and he sent me by way of suburban Orthodox. It's funny, just after a few months, I realized that it's around the corner from our house. And one of the first things that happened when I walked into suburban, that Rabbi Silber came over to find out who I am, and is everything okay? What can we do? And immediately I felt, it's unbelievable, within 2 minutes of being in the show, I really felt comfortable, felt part of the community. So even before we continue, whatever the content of the talk will be, I really encourage all of you to meet Rabbi Silber and take advantage of his being here, of his being in Pikesville. I think that you will not regret it. Rabbi Silber received his smicha from YU, was the director of education for K. He received his master's in secondary education, and he's written a book, which actually I just saw that today, and I would be very happy to read it, called The Melting Pot, which was written in honor of the 60th birthday of Israel. I know that term in Hebrew, they generally refer to Kulei too. I'm assuming that more or less has to do with that. So I'd like to please invite Rabbi Silber.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I really want to thank Rabbi Silber for inviting me, for having the opportunity to talk a little bit with you. I hope you all know how privileged you are to have such a wonderful Torah personality in your midst, who I know works tirelessly to make sure that spiritual needs are met here on campus. And really, it's a pleasure to come here and be able to share with you a little bit of Torah. So, I'd like to draw your attention to what I think is a fascinating episode in the Parsha. So, remember, let's get a little bit of context. So, over the last couple of sections of Parshos in the Torah, what have we read about? Let's go through it. Number one. Alright, creation we had a little while ago. In the second book, in Shmos, in Exodus, what are the major events? Yes, the Exodus. Right? That's the first major event. Right? Jews leave Egypt. Ultimately, we have the splitting of the Red Sea. What's next? Next major event? Sinai. Matan Torah. Right? The incredible Sinaitic revelation, whereby literally the people are actually able to experience some type of vision of God, which is something that really never occurred beforehand. And the truth is, the rabbis tell us, won't really occur afterwards. Then we come to this week's Parsha, which is Parshas Mishpatim. So what happens in Parshas Mishpatim? Anyone familiar with it? It's not exactly. I'm sorry? A bunch of laws. The truth is, the primary focus of Parshas Mishpatim is really what we would call today tort law. It really has everything to do with damages, right? One party damages another, one party's animal damages another party's animal, another individual. It's not exactly the most exciting section of the Torah. It's exceptional. If you're a details person, then this is the parsha for you. All about details, all about various aspects of law, but again, it stands in stark contrast to the incredible excitement of the last couple of sections of the Torah. But in the middle of all the laws, the Torah says something what I think is absolutely amazing. Take a look at number 1 on your sheet. We're not going to do everything inside. We'll see I put a lot more here on your sheet than what we're actually going to cover tonight, but you can look at it on your own afterwards. So the Torah says the following. Hine anochi sholech malach lefanecha. God says to the Jewish people, or actually God says to Moshe to convey to the Jewish people, I'm going to send an angel before you, lishmorcha b'derech, to watch you on the road, la'avi'acha el hamakom asher achnu nosi, and to take you to the place that I prepared for you. Of course, that place is a reference to what? Israel. Right? The land of Canaan. Hishamem mipanav. Be very careful with the angel. Ushma mikolo. Listen to him. Al tamerbo. Do not go ahead and disobey him. Kilo yisal pishachem kishmi bikirbo. Because he will not tolerate your wrongdoings. He will not tolerate your iniquity. because my name is within him. Kim shamoa tishma bekolo, listen to what he says. Va'asisa kol asher adaber, and do everything that I will say. So the Torah then goes on to discuss this angel is going to lead you into Canaan, and this angel will go ahead and help you defeat all of your enemies that currently occupy the land of Canaan. Very interesting. What's the problem? What's the problem?
Aren't they nowhere near Canaan yet?
Okay, so first of all, why are we preparing for Canaan right now when we're not in close proximity to Canaan? Excellent. Good. What else? More fundamental problem.
Why does God need a second divine intermediary when he's already working through a human intermediary?
Excellent. What's up with the Malach? Why suddenly? Remember, that's why I started out with the context. You know, at the Pesach Seder, there's one refrain, there's one statement that we make in multiple different ways throughout the Seder. And it's God going out of his way to emphasize the point, Ani v'lo malach. The whole point of the Exodus narrative is that the Jew realizes that it was God, and not an intermediary, or not one of God's right-hand angelic entities, who took us out of Egypt. And the truth is, God goes out of his way to show that he is one who splits the Red Sea. God goes out of his way to show that he is one who gives the Torah on Sinai. And yet here, seemingly out of left field, God tells us, oh, and by the way, I'm going to go ahead and give you an angel that is going to lead you. So it leaves us with two basic questions. Number one, what's going on over here? Why is the angel coming onto the scene if God was leading us the entire time? And perhaps the more fundamental question, which is what you're supposed to ask every single time you learn Torah, which is, what's in it for me? What's the lesson? Okay, remember, the Torah doesn't record anything just for the sake of recording. Everything that's in here is because there's some type of major life lesson for us to learn. So question number one is, how do we understand the story itself? Why is the angel taking over? And B, what is the take-home message for us? So any suggestions before we go on? Yes?
Well, this after they said, the Jewish people said, to Moses that he should speak for them, and God should speak for them because they're scared they're going to die.
Okay, and therefore you want to suggest what?
That, therefore, this messenger is a level of separation.
Ah, very interesting. So that's an excellent suggestion. Maybe this is the response to the Jewish people's request. When God begins saying the first of the 2 Ten Commandments, the people say, you know what, it's too much for us. Moshe, you tell us the rest. Maybe this is the recognition that they can't directly interface with God, and therefore God takes a step back, allows the angel to come forward. Good, excellent. Any other suggestions?
Maybe the problem is on Moses. Maybe Moshe is not yet in a position to lead all of them, and he needs.
Ah, very, very interesting. Maybe God is sending this angelic intermediary almost as like a mentor or a shadow to Moshe Rabbeinu. Good. What's the problem with that?
You already picked him.
Right. He already picked him, and he's already been leading.
True.
Right? Meaning he's already had to face down Pharaoh. He's already brought the Jews across the Red Sea. He's already brought down the Torah. So he's kind of already functioning in this leadership capacity. Good. Any other suggestions? Alright, so let's focus. I'm going to show you a couple of different ideas. Some of them will do inside, some of them outside. If you take a look at, I also just wanted to point out something very interesting, because once I saw this section, it got me thinking that this is not the first time that we've seen an angel mentioned. In Numbers 2 and 3, I recorded for you 2 other episodes in Bereshit in Genesis where we speak about the angel. Going a little bit out of order, if you look at number 3 first, when Avraham dispatches his trusted servant Eliezer to go find a wife for Yitzchak, if you look toward the end of number 3, he says, Hu yishlach malacho levanecha v'lakachta isha libni misham. Eliezer, now remember that story where Avraham sends Eliezer to go back to Avraham's hometown and says Eliezer, find a wife for Yitzchak. Now remember, what other information does Avram give to Eliezer? Nothing. That's the whole instruction. Just go out to my hometown and go find a wife for Yitzchak. So if you're Eliezer, you're probably quite nervous about this major undertaking. So Avram says, don't worry, because the God who has guided me this entire time, he will send a malach, he will send the angel before you. And perhaps the most famous usage is number 2, when Jacob is blessing Yosef. What does he say? HaMalach HaGoel Osimi Kol Ra. The angel that has saved me from all difficulties will save you and will save your children as well. So this is not the first time we've spoken about an angel. So the question becomes, we're not going to focus on the episodes from Genesis right now, but just keep it in the back of your mind, because perhaps if we explain what's unfolding over here, that may shed a little bit of light on those previous examples, or those previous occurrences as well. So if you take a look at number 4, the Ar Chaim HaKadosh. The Ar Chaim was one of the great Kabbalists. So the Ar Chaim writes, it's not such a big deal. Why is it not such a big deal? Because the Ar Chaim is actually interesting. He says that, if you look at the second line, he says, or the end of the first sentence, says, Lo misharis mi mishar sav, ela malach godol ki yadua lemaskilim. So, interestingly enough, the Ar Chaim often writes this way. The Ar Chaim says, and this is understood by those who understand. Now, it's not exceptionally helpful, right, for regular people like us who do not understand what the Ar Chaim understands. But his essential position is the following. His essential position is that sometimes the Torah uses the word malach, angel, as a name for God. So the Ar Chaim understands that angel doesn't have to mean angel, but angel could be a descriptive name of God. Now, why sometimes does the Torah refer to God as an angel, and why other times does the Torah use a different name? That we're not going to get into. The Ar Chaim doesn't explain. He explains it elsewhere, not our focus for tonight. So, if you want to finish your dinner, go back to your dorm or your apartment, have a good night. You can stop right here, right? Because Ar Chaim says it's not a question, it's not a question. Malach means God. Let's leave the rest alone. Okay, we're not going to do that. So, look at number 5. So, Maimonides, the Rambam, in his Moreh Nevuchim, says something amazing. The Moreh Nevuchim says that the Jewish people are about to encounter, or already beginning to encounter, a major challenge. You see, let's take a step back. Every time the Jewish people have interacted with God until now, what's been the nature of that interaction? I'm sorry?
Well, I was thinking negative, but I realized it's not true.
Well,
You mean that they've seen God as a punishing God?
More or less.
Okay, good. That's true. So that's actually very important to understand the behavior going forward. Good. How else?
I mean, in the last couple of parshas, they've sort of been angering God by complaining.
Okay. But how has God appeared to them? How has God appeared to them?
Not intimate at all, very mighty, kind of an impersonal, kind of doing like big, great, mighty things.
Okay.
Plagues,
Good.
splitting seas.
Okay.
Holding mountains.
Very good. Very strong. But let's piggyback on that a little bit. Also, very apparent. Meaning, God is up front and center in the eyes of the people. They see him. His existence is clear. He actually even spoke to them in last week's parasha. So there's no doubting the existence of God. There's no doubting the presence of God. He's very clear. What's the problem? The problem is that this is not going to be the nature of an interaction going forward. Right? This type of divine revelation, this type of clear divine exposure is not something that will happen going forward. What is God in our lives now? How would you describe God? Hidden or obscure. Obscure. Is he there? We believe he's there. Can you point to him? Can you show me where he is? Can you demonstrate his active existence? No, we need a lot of belief in order to believe that God is still with us. So the Rambam says something amazing. God is trying to proactively prepare the Jewish people for a different level of interaction. What you've seen by the plagues in Egypt, what you've seen by the splitting of the sea, what you've seen by the Sinaitic revelation, that is not what you're going to see going forward. That's not what life is going to be about. God is going to be much more obscure. And therefore, says the Rambam, that's the meaning. Hine anochi sholech malach lefanecha. The Rambam says something amazing. You know what a malach is? A malach, says the Rambam, represents the future leaders of the Jewish people. And the future leaders of the Jewish people may not converse with God the way that Moses converses with God. But the people still have to have enough trust that their leaders are conveying to them the word of God. So according to Maimonides, in the Guide to the Perplexed, which you know, of course, the great irony of the Rambam's Guide to the Perplexed is what happens when you learn it. Right? You become more perplexed. It's not a very helpful work. It was probably helpful to the Rambam because he was brilliant. But if you're not brilliant to the Rambam, it's very difficult to sometimes understand what exactly it means. But over here, according to the Rambam, he explains that malach, this word, is code for the fact that future divine interaction will not be marked by the same level of explicit interaction that has been the hallmark of divine interaction until this moment. So in the future, you will interact with a malach. In the future, you won't even hear from God directly. You will hear from an angelic intermediary. Right? That's the Rambam. If you skip a little bit to number 7, I'm just going to tell you some of these outside because I really want to spend just a couple of moments on a few others inside. So if you look at number 7, Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch. So Rav Hirsch was one of the great Torah luminaries in pre-war Germany. So Rav Hirsch says something amazing. Rav Hirsch says, well, let's read it inside for just a moment. He says by 7a, we have already remarked on Hamalach HaGoel that the term malach does not necessarily imply an individual, a human or superhuman creature, but may also be used for any contrivance which God arranges for some special purpose. Or according to Rav Hirsch, the word malach means circumstances by which God causes something to happen. Now, I want you to contrast two things. Remember, the first approach we had tonight was the Archaim. According to the Archaim, what's the definition of a malach? God. Rav Hirsch is not saying that. Rav Hirsch is saying malach means something bigger. Rav Hirsch says that there are times in life where we know what we need to happen, but we look at the pieces in front of us and we have no idea how to put those pieces together in order to achieve that particular result. The malach identity of God, malach means that God is ultimately capable of taking all of the discombobulated pieces of life and what? Actively arranging them into some kind of coherent result. So before we look over here, we now understand, by the way, the two references in Bereshit and Genesis. What happens in Bereshit? Abraham dispatches Eliezer to go find a wife for Yitzchak. Does he give him a plan? Does he give him a plan? There's no plan. The only plan is go back to my family and find a wife. So Eliezer is wondering, how the heck am I going to pull this off? And what does Abraham say? Don't worry, because the God who has guided me, Yishlach malacho lefanecha. Does it literally mean angel? No. Instead, what is Abraham telling Eliezer? God always finds a way to put the pieces into place. That's what malach means. Malach means the God who takes all the discombobulated pieces and arranges them into a coherent picture. That God will take care of you going forward. Do not worry. Do not become alarmed. Same idea. What does Yaakov say when he blesses his children? Hamalach hagoel osimi korah. The angel that has redeemed me from all difficulties. Now, how would you describe Jacob's life? Yaakov's life? How would you describe it? Difficult. Good. Any other suggestions? Long. Good. How else?
Nasty British and long.
Right? I would describe it as rulingly, ridiculously difficult. It's not just a little difficult, right? Remember, we know Yaakov's life. He has to run away from home because of Esau. Then he has a falling out where he has a difficult time with his father. Then there's the abduction and rape of Dinah. Then there is the sale of Yosef. Yaakov has a terribly turbulent life. So what does he say to his children? I don't know how things worked out, but they did. So my blessing to you is Hamalach Hagoel Osimi Korah. The Malach, the God who puts all of the pieces in place. Because I wouldn't be here today if God did not put the pieces in place. That same divine orchestration of events should guide you in your life going forward as well. And if we plug this into here, Rav says something amazing. Sometimes malach can also refer to a person who is going to help with the execution of the divine plan. Therefore, before we read it inside, who could the malach be referring to over here? Moshe. Says Rav Hirsch, the malach here is none other than the man Moses. So what's happening according to Rav Hirsch? Remember, let's take a step back. It's always important when you learn these episodes to try to put yourself, in the sandals of the characters of the story. So think about it. If you're one of the members of the Jewish people standing in the desert, what's going through your mind right now? What will you be thinking?
It's going to be hard.
It's going to be hard. You're being nice. I would be thinking, what the heck did we get ourselves into? There are 3.5 million people in the desert, right? That's about 3.5 million Jews, men, women, and children. 3.5 million people in the desert. It's very nice. The Egyptians are gone. That's great. When you look in front of you, what do you see? Desert. When you look to the side of you, what do you see? Okay, you see what I'm going with this, right? There's no sustainable water source. There's no sustainable food source. Great, we have mud. We have a miraculous well. But how exactly are we going to pull this off? Right? And now, you understand also what God's telling me. God's saying, don't worry, because you're going to go into the land of Canaan, and you will fight, and you will be fierce warriors. Only one problem. What's the problem? There are no fierce warriors within the ranks of the Jewish people. Not because they can't be fierce warriors, but because, remember, they just spent the last 4 generations being slaves in Egypt. So if you're a Jew standing in the desert right now, despite all of the incredible divine fireworks and all the incredible things, you are scared, you're scared out of your mind because you don't know how you are going to pull this whole thing off. So what does God say to the Jewish people? Hine anochi sholeach malach lefanecha. Don't worry. Don't worry. I am the God who helps you put all of the pieces into place. And you know what the good news is? I'm giving you Moshe. Moshe is going to be the malach. Moshe is my man. Moshe is my ambassador. He's going to be at your help, and he is going to put everything into place. So what's amazing, according to Rav Hirsch, is, you're not there yet, but God willing, one day you'll be in the role of parents. So what's the most important job of a parent? Have kids. Okay, good.
Make kids self-sustaining.
To make kids.
They can prepare them for the world.
So let me reframe that a little bit. I think that the greatest job that a parent has is to build your child's confidence, right? Because think about it. If you have confidence in life, then in reality, it doesn't mean you're always going to be successful, but at least you feel prepared enough to meet the challenge. And the people in our lives, ultimately, as we get older, we have to give ourselves confidence. But the first people who are supposed to instill us with a real sense of confidence in life are our parents. Not ridiculous confidence. I mean, I'm not talking about the parents who say, oh, my child, oh my gosh, my child. The best thing since sliced bread. I mean, he's 3 years old and he's doing, algebraic equations. I mean, that's silly. And actually, parents like that set their children up for failure because they create unrealistic expectations. I'm talking about real confidence, where a parent bolsters a child in an appropriate way that the child realizes you could do it. You have skills, you have abilities, you're a good person, you're special, your life is meaningful. So what is God doing over here? God is trying to proactively build confidence within the ranks of the Jewish people. He doesn't want to wait until there's a crisis to tell the people everything's going to be okay. He wants to proactively tell them, yes, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be just a walk in the park. I know that. But don't worry. I know that it looks like you have an insurmountable challenge in front of you. But I'm telling you that I'm going to help you put all of the pieces together. And what's the proof? I'm giving you a Moshe. I'm giving you a Moshe.
Is that like a thing only to a certain point when supposedly people are already like mature or more confident with their surroundings, I guess, and like, I don't know, like nowadays we have so much, information, and even after, like the guy to Israel or temporary thing, or was it until Mashiach comes?
No, it definitely, you're saying that it definitely was a temporary thing. You know, it's almost like to give you a parable for that. It's, you know, it's like when the child, to use the parent-child again, it's when the child begins to walk. So what does the parent do? You know, the parent holds on to the child. But at a certain point in time, the parent does that until the child gets the confidence that they can walk. And then the parent has to let go. So there's no question that God does not overtly hold our hand the entire way. He does it over here because right now we're maturing. But after a while, he definitely lets go. There's no question. Yes?
But if we're saying he's picked Moshe now, hasn't he already said who picked Moshe before to lead them out of Egypt itself?
100%. But now, I think God is anticipating a new level of fear factor. Because
so it's making it two separate events. The Exodus itself was one event, and now we're at a second event.
So Moshe, he showed that Moshe was the leader at the time of the Exodus, but now we're post-Exodus. We're post-Exodus. And now God feels the need to proactively reaffirm the presence of Moshe in order to quell any kind of fear or panic that may stem within the people. All right, a very interesting approach. But then I want to draw your attention in the last couple of minutes that we have to one last approach. Now, the common denominator between the approach of the Archaim and the Rambam in Hopkins and Rav Hirsch, the common denominator among those three approaches is what? God's worried about the people. Good. What else? I'm positive. Good. What else? What are none of the three doing? Murdering Canaan. What do you mean?
Like, we're not talking about military leaders.
Okay, good. What else? Think about textually. What are none of them doing? No one's interpreting Malach as how? An angel. Right? It's interesting that everyone is bending over backwards to show that Malach means something other than an angel. So, but if we're going to be textually honest, we have to try to understand, we have to at least take into account the fact that the Torah, when it says Malach, may actually mean what? May actually mean an angel. So in fact,
it could just mean Malach, whatever Malach means, like angel is the translation of angel.
Alright, so that's true, and that's good, because that's clearly where the Archaim, the Rambam, and Rav Hirsch are coming from. They're like, just because we translate Malach as angel, right, correct, doesn't mean that that has to be the definition of the word. But, if we're honest, the overwhelming majority of time that the word Malach appears throughout Tanakh, we do translate it as angel, which has to account for something. So I would just suggest that if we want to look at this pasuk in a textually honest way, we should at least give a little bit of time to the possibility that maybe Malach actually means angel. And in fact, if you look at number 9, the Medrash actually says this explicitly. The Medrash actually writes, Hine anochi sholech malach. What does it mean I'm sending an angel? Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu LeMoshe, Heim mi sheshamar es ha'avos, hu yishmar es ha'banim. The Medrash says something I think is absolutely astounding. That God says, I'm going to send you an angel. And which angel? The same angel that watched over the patriarchs is the same angel that will watch over you. So what does the Medrash mean, the same angel that watched over the patriarchs? So what does the Medrash want to quote in number 9? The same exact verses that we quoted in number 2 and 3. The pasuk by Abraham and the pasuk by Yaakov. So the Medrash goes with the literal understanding here that Malach actually means Malach. That Malach actually means angel. Interesting enough, we're not going to do it inside, but the commentaries actually go so far as to identify the particular angel that was going to lead us. So in Ibn Ezra, in number 10, the Ibn Ezra writes that it's Michael, one of the right-hand angels of God. In number 11, the Gemara actually says it's Metatron. Again, we could give a whole class just on who are these particular angels and what's their particular identities. We're not going to do it. I'm just pointing out that you see there is another school of thought that takes it so literally that it's not just an angel, but we're actually going to identify a particular angel. But I want to draw your attention to number 13, because Rashi comes along and says something amazing. Again, going with the approach that angel literally means angel, Rashi says, Hine anochi sholech malach, kan nisbasru sha'aside lachto. God here is foreshadowing the fact that they are going to sin. Ushchina omeres lahem, and God Himself will say to the people, Ki lo e'eleh b'kirbecha, that I will not live within your midst. What event is Rashi referring to over here? Anyone know? What event?
Calf.
The sin of the golden calf. Very good. What happens after the sin of the golden calf is... I'm sorry? Yeah, so the chronology of this is also subject to incredible dispute. Here, what you have to say according to Rashi is, remember, Matan Torah is an event that spans a certain amount of time. So you have to say that these laws were being given to the Jewish people before Moshe Rabbeinu went up. Then, after he gives them the laws, and after this section is said, that's when Moshe goes up. And when Moshe goes up, that's when the whole miscalculation occurs and the sin of the golden calf actually comes about. So according to Rashi, what's happening in these verses is a foreshadow. God is telling the people, God is Moshe telling people, that they're going to sin for the golden calf, and the sin is going to be so severe that God Himself is going to have to withdraw from the people, and God replaces Himself with an angelic intermediary who will then go and lead the people. What's the problem with this? No reason, a lot of problems.
I haven't heard of this thing.
I'm sorry?
Well,
Yeah, good. Say it again.
why haven't we heard of this thing?
Okay. So if indeed God is replacing the angel, why did we ever hear of it? Hold on to that for just a moment. What was it?
They were the highest level of Tuma when they were trying.
Okay, good. They've already been defiled, and yet God is still remaining contact. Why would this be so different? Good. What else? What's the theological problem with it?
Seems deterministic.
Right? Meaning, what's the greatest theological challenge that we operate with? Free will. Right? Because on one hand, if you believe in an omniscient God who knows everything, so if He knows everything, then He already knows what I'm going to do in 5 minutes from now. If He knows what I'm going to do in 5 minutes from now, then what? Then do I really have free will? So it's interesting. The Maimonides deals with this in the laws of Tshuva. So he says something very interesting. So Maimonides goes through this whole thing, that do we really have free will if God knows what I'm going to do? Then do I really have a choice? So how does Maimonides resolve it? In a very profound way. He says, don't think about it. Don't think about it. Right? We don't really understand it anyway, so what is the point? You can spend your time philosophizing about it, cogitating about it. We don't understand it simply because we don't understand God, we understand what it means that God means. So the Rambam says, don't waste your time with it, just forget about it, but just know one thing. You have free will. That's how the Rambam ends. It's actually interesting, it's not a topic for tonight, but the Ravid, who's one of the commentaries of the Rambam, actually comes out very strongly against Rambam. He's very upset with the Rambam. He says to the Rambam, why do you bring up a question that you can't answer? What's the point? So the Ravid says, you know what you've just done? You've gone ahead and you're going to get people all excited about a major theological challenge, and you can't answer it. So you should have just left it alone and what? People wouldn't have thought about it. So by the way, just as an aside, I think it also points to a very fundamental dispute between the thinking of between the different schools of thought. The Ravid was clearly of the school of thought that, you know what, if you don't bring it up, people don't think about it. Where from the Maimonidean perspective, the Rambam felt that what?
Someone's going to think.
Of course people think about it. Of course people think, what do you think? You need a rabbi to go ahead and write something down in order for you to start thinking? People, by definition, are thoughtful creatures. So the Rambam says, you think I'm going to put this idea in their mind? People have been grappling with this idea from the beginning of time. And the Rambam says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to legitimize the process of questioning. I'm going to show the people that it's okay to question. And it's okay to ask difficult questions. But you just have to accept the fact that sometimes we don't have the answers. But just because you don't get the answer, A, doesn't delegitimize the question, and B, doesn't mean you can't ask. But as Jews, we know that one of the most important things we have to learn is we live with doubt. We live with questions. We don't deny it, we don't run away from it, we embrace it. But we have to somehow reconcile ourselves with it. Okay, so the problem we have with Rashi is, so according to Rashi, what's unfolding over here is, God is telling us that we're going to sin, He's going to punish us, and what? And He's going to go ahead and withdraw His presence, and an angel's going to lead us. Problem number one is the theological issue of God telling me what's going to happen before it happens. But there's a bigger problem. Well, not a bigger problem, there's another one. Yes?
I'm sorry. Is it possible that we could understand this Rashi as Atidin Lach toe in Israel, and Lo Lo B'Kirbecha, even though it was said by the sin of the golden calf, it was said in the context of you're a stiff-necked nation and I will kill you if you sin. So Atikin Lachto means that if they will sin in Israel, then I will kill
Excellent.
them.
So you're almost halfway to number 15. Good, excellent. So the Ramban says something amazing. So the Ramban, before I give you your answer, the Ramban actually says there's a bigger problem with all this, which is it never happened. As mentioned before, whoever heard of this angel? You never heard of this angel because an angel never led us. It was God who led us in the desert. In fact, the Ramban points out that what happened was after the sin of the golden calf, so God says to Moshe, I'm not leaving the people. I'm going to send the angel. Moshe says, well, you know what, God? Listen, if you're going to be like that, then don't take us out. Then just leave us here to die. I mean, Moshe essentially threatens God. Don't try that at home. Not a good idea. Right? But Moshe does it. And he says, God, if you don't lead us, then don't bother to take us because we're not going. And God's response? God yields. It's an amazing thing. God yields before Moshe and he says, okay, I'll lead you. So the Ramban says, Rashi, what are you talking about? The angel never led us. Moshe, whatever this means, changed God's mind. So the Ramban therefore posits that you're right, this didn't happen in the desert, but it did happen in the land of Israel. And he makes reference to an episode in the first chapter of the book of Yoshua, Joshua, where the Jewish people come into the land of Israel, and at that point in time, God takes a step back, and an angel does in fact lead the people. Okay. But still we're left with a fundamental problem, which is that if we go with Rashi's approach, that first of all, the school of thought that says that this is literally an angel, okay? But according to Rashi, it's not an angel that's coming to lead them now, it's an angel that's going to happen later. And it's not just a little later, it's not going to happen until the times of Yoshua, right? And which now we know is ultimately going to be 40 years later. Then why is the Torah telling us this now? So I'm going to share with you an amazing idea. We'll do it outside. Take a look at number 17. This is from the Sefer Drash Moshe. The Sefer Drash Moshe was written by Moshe Feinstein's name. So one of the greatest leaders of our generation, or I should say the previous generation. So Rav Moshe wrote the following. Rav Moshe said, you know, everything depends on how you read that Rashi. Here's what we know. God tells us we're going to sin, and as a result, God is going to take a step back, and he's going to put an angel in place. So Rav Moshe writes, if you ask the common person, what would you call that? They would tell you, it's a punishment. It's a punishment. Rav Moshe says it's not a punishment. It's an opportunity. Why? Let me illustrate this in an interesting way. God willing, we'll soon have a third base on Mikdash. Mashiach will come, we'll have a third base on Mikdash, we'll go up to Yerushalayim together. When you go up to the base on Mikdash, what must you leave behind? What can't you take with you? Your wallet, number one. Number two, your shoes. Number three, your wallet. Excellent. You have to leave all of that behind. What's the common denominator among those three things?
Things which support you.
Things which support you. They represent human confidence, right? When you have shoes, so the truth is you can walk wherever you want to walk. You don't have to worry about what's on the ground. When you have a wallet, you have money, you have financial security. Your stick steadies you on the ground. Why do you have to leave all of those behind? Because when you are in the presence of God, you are humbled. When you are in the direct presence of God, man realizes that he doesn't stand on his own 2 feet. And when you are in the direct presence of God, the expectations are much greater, which is why that when even the smallest infraction is committed in the presence of God, what happens? What happens?
It kills you.
I was going to say a little bit sugarcoat, but yeah, we see this where in the episode in Parsha Shmini, where the two sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, commit what would appear to be a relatively minor infraction of bringing an additional incense offering, an Eish Zarah, and they're stricken down immediately. So why such a severe punishment? Well, it makes sense because when you are in the direct presence of God, the expectation for near perfection is much more pronounced. So says Rav Moshe something amazing. God understood that we're going to fail. Why does he understand that we're going to fail?
He created us.
Because He created us, right? God knows the plan book because He wrote it. So God knows that we're going to fail. Well, here's the problem. If you fail in the presence of God, then what? If you fail in the presence of God, then you don't necessarily have the opportunity to get back up. So what does God do? If God knows we're going to fail, and He accepts the fact that we're going to fail, He also has to do what? He has to create the framework that allows us to get back up and try again. But here's the inherent anomaly. What do we want more than anything? On a theological level. But spiritual, what do we want? Right? To be in Olam Haba, but we want Olam Haba not in death. We want Olam Haba here, right? We want to be close to God. That's what we want. What does God want more than anything? Right? To be close to us. So it's an amazing thing. We want to be close to God. God wants to be close to us. But in that closeness is an inherent danger. What's the danger? That if we live in constant proximity, if we're constantly lifting Hashem, constantly in direct presence of God, then when we fail, which we inevitably will, the stakes are so much higher, and the ability to rebound from that failure may not be within reach. So what does God do? God makes the ultimate sacrifice. You know what the ultimate demonstration of love? Love is a very misused word, right? People love their parents, but they love pizza, right? I love my spouse, but I love football. So the word unfortunately is very tarnished. But what's the ultimate? How do you demonstrate love for another person? What's the ultimate demonstration of love? Right? When you go ahead and you do something for that person that is not in your best interest. That's love. That's love. It hurts me. It's not. If it was up to me, I wouldn't do this. But I love you so much that I know it's good for I'm going to do it. So says Rav Moshe Feinstein something amazing. God wants to be close to us. We want to be close to God. But God also realizes that sometimes a small degree of separation is in our best interest. It's not in God. God wants to be close. But if He knows that we're going to fail, and if He accepts the fact that we're going to fail, He wants to give us the chance to get back up. The chance to get back up can only be accomplished how? If there's a little bit of distance between Him and between us. Says Rav Moshe, that's what's occurring over here. Hine anovi sholeach malach levanecha. It's not God simply telling us that we're going to sin. It's God telling us, I accept the fact that you're going to fail. I accept it. I even embrace it because I'm God who created you with the propensity to fail. But what I want more than anything is that when you fall, you can get back up. And so how do I do that? How do I allow for that? By creating a degree of separation. I'm going to send the malach. Now, by the way, interestingly enough, the malach doesn't occur until the times of Yoshua. If we combine a couple of approaches, if you understand, like Rav Hirsch said, that malach could mean circumstances. So what God is really telling us is, I accept the fact that you're going to fail. I embrace the fact that you're going to fail. And I want to give you the opportunity to get back up. How do we accomplish that? A certain degree of separation between ourselves and God. When does that happen in the desert? When does that happen? So Rashi says, it happens to happen with Joshua, when God takes a step back. But how does God give us the opportunity to fail in the desert without being totally obliterated? Where is the malach circumstance? The Mishkan. Excellent. If you notice, I meant to put a diagram here. Right? So, in your mind's eye, how do you see the Mishkan? What's the setup of the encampment in the desert? What do you have in the middle of the encampment? The Mishkan. We call that Machane Shechina. Right? The camp of God. What's right outside of that? Next square? Machane Leviah. Right? The camp of the Levites. What's outside of that? Machane Yisrael. Where the rest of the people live. So what is God's structure for us in the desert? Just a small degree of separation. A small degree of separation. So that this way, when we fail, we're not failing directly in His presence. There's a little bit of space, and that little bit of space is what allows us to get back up. So now we have an understanding as to what's happening with the angel. But I think more important than just understanding the particular episode of Chumash, I think we emerge with an incredible life lesson. You know, sometimes when we fail in life, we're terribly disappointed in ourselves. You know, our Soloveitchik says that the greatest challenge, the greatest hurdle to change is something he calls the sinner mentality. What's the sinner mentality? That people assume they can't change. Look,
They are what they do.
they are what they do. I'm a sinner. I sin. I'm actually pretty good at it. Right? I'm pretty proficient. I've been doing it for many years. And so that's what I know. That's what and even if I wanted to change, do you really think that God wants someone like me back in his presence? And I really worth it? And the Rebbe says you'd be surprised how many people go through life never having the courage to change because they think they're not wanted. They think that they're so tarnished, they're so damaged, that why would God ever want anything to do with them? And so here we see at the beginning of the Jewish people's, they're still an embryonic people, at the beginning of they're fledgling people. At the beginning of their existence, what's the message that God conveys to them through Moshe, through this episode of the Malach? I know you're going to fail. I accept the fact that you're going to fail. I embrace the fact that you're going to fail because I created you that way. But all I ask of you is recognize that I've given you the framework to get back up. I've given you the framework to try again. I've done something, God says, that's personally hurtful to me. I've removed myself a step in order that you can get back up. And what was true for our ancestors is certainly true for us today. We all have our challenges. And sometimes we clear the hurdles, and sometimes we stumble over the hurdles. Such is the nature of life. And some of us clear 5 of the hurdles and fall on the 6th, and some of us fall on each and every one. But the beautiful message that God conveys to us in this time of Torah is that no matter how many times we fall, we are never fully outside the presence of God. No matter how many times we fall, God never washes his hands of us. God doesn't ask us to stop falling. All he asks us for is to have the constant courage